Thank you very much for having me. You see a picture here of the Liechtenstein castle. So it's a pleasure for me to talk at the crypto castle here in Germany and to talk about tokenization of a real world asset. That's what my talk is going to be about. And it is based on our Liechtenstein civil law framework TVTG. Some of you might also know that specific framework under the name Blockchain Act. We already heard a little bit about me. I'm Thomas Nägele. I'm now attorney at law, but that's my day job. I used to code software for some years. I'm a horrible coder though, but I at least understand a little bit about coding. And a lot of people actually call me a tech person. I'm a gadget guy, so whatever technology I will find and see, I will actually try to buy and use it. Coming to the talk, we actually today we already had a talk from Henning about challenges when you have enforceability of legal contracts and how to develop smart contracts and enforce them, how judges can actually think of our blockchain transactions we have. And we faced that challenge as well. And we started in 2016 in Liechtenstein a work group that was initiated by the Prime Minister actually. It was a work group to think about regulation in the blockchain space. That was 2016. And back then, you might remember like the topic was ICOs, right? But in Liechtenstein, we said, okay, that's one part where we have a look at it, but we also want to do something which never ever, back then, no other jurisdiction had ever thought of. And we created this vision of having a token economy. And this vision of having a token economy basically says that we could actually digitize a lot of assets which are at the moment not tradable and not easy transferable. And with the use of blockchain, we make them very easy to transfer. And based on that like technology, we could build a whole ecosystem of things. So you have an ownership token, and then you can have an insurance token, and you can build up a whole new economy based on that technology. And what we figured out is that we said, okay, if you, for example, now tokenize, and we all know that we have NFTs, and people will tell you there's an NFT and there's a piece of art, and if you buy the NFT, you might get a fraction of the ownership of the real piece of art, and then you have a usage right for the NFT, with the NFT to display it, you get just basically a license. And we said, okay, but if you look at that from a legal point of view, that's really very challenging. And we don't know the outcome. We don't know if a judge will decide in 4 or 5 or whatever years. Coming back to the question, we don't know the outcome. So we said, okay, what we have to do is, besides everything else what we did, it's a very comprehensive approach. We said, we will provide the legal framework for tokenization of assets. And I will finish my talk with the 3 key takeaways. And that was actually the main goal. Legal certainty and to providing the legal framework to actually allow these blockchain transactions we have to be legally enforceable. We are not there yet, what we heard this morning, that we don't need courts anymore. That's maybe a very long journey to get there. But at least what we are providing here in Liechtenstein is the legal framework which allows you to actually enforce your rights in the real world if you use this technology. And we came up with the idea that we will let a token, we define a token legally, we have a definition of the token, and then that's what we call token container model. Based on that model, it allows you to actually represent rights in that token, and that's called token container model, and we will have a little bit more information about that now. So I promise you it's not going to be a legal talk. That will be the only part of the law you will see on that screen. That's it. That's just a legal definition. Token is a piece of information on a TT system, and that's very technical. Like, I actually wrote a book, so I will donate that to the library. Every castle has a library, so I will donate that book to a library if you want to read like a 160 pages law text. Actually, aeternity is also mentioned several times in it. You can read it, but every of these words and how they are arranged, they have a lot of background information. So it starts with the question like, why don't we use a string of information, or why don't we use like data instead of information? There's a lot of thoughts put into that definition. And this definition is now also used as a base for what the European Commission issued lately with the MiCA regulation. This allows us, because now what we wanted to have a legal definition of token, which allows us to represent rights, to get this legal certainty. That was the whole idea, actually, to define it, and that is also actually answering a lot of questions why we took that approach. But to keep it simple, because I said I will not go into really very much detail here, we only have 15 minutes. So what we basically then do is we let tokens represent rights. That's how we do tokenization of assets. Because how you tokenize a physical object, piece of art, like the real painting, how do you tokenize that? You have to somehow link the real world with the digital world. And that's not only ownership. Ownership is one example. It's from a legal point of view one of the more challenging ones, but it is one of the examples. You can have usage rights. Securities is a classical, like that's really a classic already, right? You want to have your token representing your shareholder rights. You should be able to claim your dividends, to vote at the General Assembly, and to be as flexible as you need to be, and to allow for actually unlimited set of rights to be represented in a token. You have to have a very agnostic legal definition. And our approach allows actually for that in Liechtenstein. And then that's how we solved, on the one hand, we said, okay, we defined the token in a way that it allows for representation of rights. And the other challenge, big challenge we had to solve, is to somehow then connect these rights to the acting individuals, or also technology. Like it's also possible that you let a smart contract actually get into transactions which are then legally binding. So for that we developed a new model, and we called it TT keys. It doesn't stand for private key. Like in the beginning we thought about private keys, but we all know that might change, and there are different implementations of that. But we have a concept of, and I call that relationship model between the token and the acting individual via the keys to the identifier, and that's in most cases, it's, for now at least, it's the address. And now you end up with a model where you have in the center, you have the token, and this the token actually connects these two worlds. And based on that, you can build up a lot of products and ideas and services. And if you now look at, okay, if you have that now as a base, this token container model, if you now look into detail how you, and I already told you that like the tokenization of a real world asset is the challenging one, let's look a little bit more into detail how you tokenize, for example, a watch. Why a watch? Because that was the example we used in the work group all the time. And actually this happened already. So there was an Audemars Piguet with 500,000, was tokenized 3 or 4 months ago. And with a legally enforceable claim, you get ownership claim to that token. So that is actually a real world use case already. And we used it just as one of the examples. So whatever you can think of, physical objects, be it a diamond, a watch, piece of art, whatever, as long as we are talking about real world objects with some limitations like real estate, for example. But let's start with the watch. So how could you actually combine these two worlds? Because like what we want to have is, and the guys who are interested in technology, I mean, what you are trying to solve is actually to have the transaction like done, and we don't get into the finality discussion now, but that's what you're providing with a technology, right? But what you want to have is actually then that also the represented right is transferred. So in very simple terms, if you say, I have a token and this token represents the ownership right to a watch, right? What you want to end up with is a situation that if I then transfer the token to Pablo, the token representing the ownership right, what should actually happen is that Pablo can claim the watch from me. I mean, if I hand it over, that's simple, right? You don't need to do anything else. But what happens if I just, and we don't, like, that's the easy situation. We don't need like blockchain and tokenization for that. But if Pablo then sells it to some friend of him in Uruguay, for example, and then this person like transfers it to a guy in Japan, right? Also, this person, the token holder in Japan, has to be able to claim his ownership rights. And that's the thing you want to have. And how do you do that on a physical object? The idea is very simple, and that's one of the implementation. You don't have to use that. There are several other ones. You have to have some identification of a token that makes it really unique. And on the other hand, for a watch, mostly it's actually simply have a model number and a serial number. The model number identifies the model, so a swatch, for example, and then the serial number, the really unique piece. And how to combine these two, that was actually the outcome of my analysis I did in my PhD, is one solution could be that you actually write the model number and the serial number into the token. You have there like areas where you can write this, making a fungible token to a non-fungible token. And what you need on the watch itself is, one of the ideas is to use a tokenization clause. And I think that's best practice. So that's actually, you tell people that if you want to transfer rights of that physical objects, you need also to transfer the token. Otherwise, the rights are not transferred. I will not go here again into detail. For the lawyers between us, that prevents the good faith acquisition. That's the only thing what we actually can get out of that. But it's crucial, because otherwise we will not get these legally enforceable claims. So because I only have 15 minutes, that was the only thing I wanted to tell you. There is a legal framework available, and you can make use of this legal framework. You can use this legal framework for your case as well, for tokenization of assets. And what's the whole idea of it? It's to end up with enforceability of blockchain transactions. You need this enforceability. And we call it trustworthy technologies. I'm not going into detail. What you end up with is that if you transfer a token also, and you need that framework, the legal framework, that you end up with an enforceable claim. And that sounds so easy, but it's really very challenging to find a solution for that. And a lot of actually jurisdictions in Europe don't have such a solution yet. Some of them are working on it. And a lot of people might tell you that there is some regulation coming in Europe. It's called MiCA, Market and Crypto Assets Regulation. If you never heard of it, please have a look at it, because it will have an incredibly influence of what is happening in Europe. Crypto assets are then regulated in all of Europe with the same level approach. The good thing about that is that you can incorporate your company in one jurisdiction in the European Union EEA area, and then passport your services. That's the term they use, the technical term. But you can actually really actively market your products and services through all of Europe. What it is not actually solving is the challenge of this civil law approach, this legal certainty of enforceable claims. So if you want to, for example, incorporate in Germany, or if you want to incorporate in France or Austria, or wherever you want, or in Liechtenstein, you can do that. You can make use of this framework. And if you want to then have this legal certainty for your transactions, have a look at what we did in Liechtenstein. I already said what is missing in MiCA. It's not providing us with this legal framework for tokenization. It's not that it's just a fact. And why is that the case? It's not that the European Commission didn't think of it or analyze it, but this is civil law, and civil law is like the last resort. Any member state, you cannot actually find a political agreement in most cases to harmonize civil law. So that's like the holy grail of every jurisdiction. Civil law, it's not going to change. So my three key takeaways for today. We have a different regulatory approach. It's a very, very comprehensive one. It's I think, very well thought through. It allows you for a lot of things, and it's in most areas it's very well balanced, and I think it's at least worth to have a look at. It's the legal framework for tokenization. It allows you for tokenization to end up having this legal certainty you need. And with Mika, never forget, with Mika, it's not like solving all of the challenges. It brings a lot of challenges as well. We can talk about that for hours. I will not bother you with that. But these are my 3 key takeaways. And the main key takeaway is that tokenization of assets is possible, legally binding with the token container model.